Hello, and welcome to another episode of Agentforce Now Code Live. My name is Charles Watkins. I'm a lead developer advocate and your host for this month's show. Now, as always, I have to do this. I have to do the forward looking slide. All right. So, as always, I want to remind you that Salesforce is a publicly traded company, which means that you should not make any financial decisions based on any forward looking statements that I make on this stream. Okay. And the next thing I want to do is to remind you to join the Salesforce community. Stay in touch. So join the Salesforce community. Follow us on X, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us wherever you happen to be. All right. So for this month's show, we are going to be talking about what I would consider the most exciting release from this year's TDX, which is Salesforce Multi-Framework. Now, Salesforce Multi-Framework is a part of this Headless 360 release. And as opposed to helping you work with agents, what Salesforce Multi-Framework does is allow you to build UIs with the skill sets, with the tooling, with the component libraries that you may already have using an open source library called React. Okay. So I want to remind you that this is a live stream. This is a code live. So as I present, as I code, please feel free to ask questions and also answer questions. And the first question I have for you is, where are you watching from? I'm in Seattle, Washington, for what it's worth. All right. So I am going to hop into a short presentation just to level set, let you know what Salesforce Multi-Framework is, give you a little bit of how it works and why you might be interested in it. But I also want to take a look at the chat to see who's here. All right. So we have, hello, Sally. Good to see you. Sally's an MVP, a golden hoodie, and also a creator who makes really great content, coding with Sally. Good to see you. I see someone from Brazil. We have Ganesh from England. Nice to see you. Hope things are great across the pond. Let's see here. We have so many folks here. Giovanni from Colorado. Hello, Giovanna. Hello. We got someone from Chicago, from Thailand, from Berlin, Cincinnati. I love Cincinnati. I used to go all the time. From Brazil, Slovakia, all over the world. All right. Great to meet you all. Great to meet you all. And great to see so many people from so many awesome places. All right. I am going to hop into a short presentation here. And we're going to go from there. First, let me get my screen set up here. Okay. Alrighty. Just a moment. And we are going to share our screen. Unlike a lot of content producers, I only use one screen. Okay, so let's talk about Headless 360. So if you're new to this, if you haven't seen the TDX keynote, the big release was Salesforce Headless 360, okay? And there were really three main things that Headless 360 actually enables. First, it allows you to deploy experiences on any surface. So you're not tied to the Salesforce UI or the Salesforce platform as your UI or your client or your surface. The other big announcement was that you now had the developer interfaces to build with any coding agent or IDE using MCP servers, CLIs, and APIs, and other developer-friendly interfaces. And the third one The one that I think did not get as much attention as it deserves because it's so incredibly exciting and is also the subject of this stream is Salesforce Multi-Framework, which allows you to render using any UI framework on the Salesforce platform. So for the first time ever, you can build on Salesforce with the framework that you're already using. Now, at the moment, it's just React, but we'll add more frameworks. So let's talk a little bit about Salesforce Multi-Framework. So to date, Salesforce Multi-Framework is a new runtime. It's a new runtime that allows you to write UI code in React, and in the future, frameworks like Vue, Svelte, Angular, preview them locally in the same way you would with any other web app, and then deploy them to Salesforce for hosting, for security, and data storage. So here's how it works. You quickly scaffold your React app, and you can jumpstart development with templates that you can create in one of three ways, and I'll show you how to do that. You'll get instant feedback from live preview because React supports hot reloading, so you don't have to deploy your app to see any coding changes. You're going to see that during today's demo. Now, crucially, this is React. Now, I've been looking through LinkedIn, on X, other platforms, and I've seen some folks say that, oh, this is a Salesforce version of React. It is not. It is React, open source React. And so what you'll be doing is building React apps using the familiar React toolchain. But then when it comes time to deploy it, you'll deploy it like any other metadata. And so there's no real surprises in your existing workflow as a web developer or a Salesforce developer. And because it's built on Salesforce, it benefits from Salesforce auth. And so you can securely connect to your Salesforce data using the user's permissions, right? And if you're building an employee internal app, it just kind of works. The person is logged into Salesforce. They have access to the data that they have access to based on their profiles and permissions, right? And because this is code, of course, you can vibe code with Agentforce vibes to turn natural language into React apps. You can also vibe code with whatever coding agent you happen to use. Okay. So there are two pieces really to Salesforce Multi-Framework. You can build entire apps with Salesforce Multi-Framework, like apps that are just hosted on Salesforce, internal employee-facing apps, as well as external experience apps for customer portals. And these are React apps, but they have deep integration into Salesforce using a new Salesforce data SDK. It's a framework agnostic SDK that lets you essentially retrieve data for a user without having to write a lot of the wiring and auth and all that other stuff yourself. And it's framework agnostic, and it's also runtime aware. So you can use the same SDK for both building a customer-facing customer portal experience site or an internal-facing employee app. So it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, right? The other side of Salesforce Multi-Framework, and this is still being built, this is not in beta yet, are micro-frontends. And these essentially allow you to build small React widgets and components and embed them inside of Salesforce. That's one. And the other one is using Lightning Out to actually embed Salesforce in other apps. Now, we won't talk about micro front ends today. We're just going to focus on applications. But it's good to know. All right. Alrighty. So let me tell you a little bit about this data SDK. Now, this is the headless kind of part of Salesforce Multi-Framework. Essentially what it is it's a node package, right? Like any other node library. It's open source. You can go find it, I'm pretty sure, on GitHub if you want to. And it allows you to access your Salesforce data in API from React multi-framework apps on the Salesforce platform. Now, there's a lot of reasons to use this. The first is that it abstracts away a lot of the difficulty of having to build these things for both experience sites and employee sites. It handles the environment specific implementation details of things like auth, of things like fetching data and other complexities like that. It in the background automatically can detect capabilities. So depending on where the code is running, it will have certain capabilities that it exposes or not, based on the runtime environment. And crucially, it is TypeScript. It supports TypeScript. So you have TypeScript definitions for IntelliSense, for autocomplete, for compile time, type safety. And in my experience, it also just makes it much easier for coding agents to write good code because they benefit from IntelliSense and type definitions as well. So the data SDK, we're going to be using that a lot. Okay. And then I just want to talk a little bit about Salesforce multi-framework local dev. This is one of the best parts of, I would say, building with Salesforce multi-framework is that you get really, really instantaneous feedback on all the changes that you're doing. And as you're developing locally, you actually are working with live data. So the way this works is that you locally will run a dev server using a tool called Vite. It's an open source tool, very, very common in web development. And it runs on localhost, so you can open it up in your browser. And in the background, we have a plugin that essentially uses your CLI credentials to handle auth, to essentially sign in as your user as you're developing so that you can interact with Salesforce data. And the outcome of this is that you are able to do real-time testing with live data. You're able to actually see your queries, retrieve data, and update data and stuff like that as you're developing in a sandbox. All right. So before I hop into the code, I want to take a look to see if we have any questions. And we have one question here. Micro-frontends, is it the same as Axle or a different concept? So they are related concepts. So just to provide a little bit of context. So Axle is the agent experience, the agent experience layer. I think it's called the Headless experience layer now. And it essentially allows agents to render rich UIs in a variety of different contexts. So you could render it in Agentforce, you could render it in ChatGPT, you could render it in Claude, depending on where the agent is. It would still be able to render rich UI. Now, the headless experience layer, or formerly known as the agent experience layer, does allow you to use React. It's a related concept, but it is a little different. Axle is for rendering rich UI for agents, whereas micro-frontends is for embedding React and in the future Vue and Angular and Svelte widgets inside of Lightning apps, essentially. Like you'd go into Lightning Experience Builder and then you'd be able to drag and drop a React component in a Lightning app, a Lightning page, the same way you would a Lightning component. It's really cool. It's really cool stuff. Awesome question. All right, let's do some coding. Let's do some coding. All right, so what I have here is a basic Salesforce project that I just spun up just to show you what I have to start. I do have some data, like a data plan to have some fake data for a scratch work. And I have a scratch work definition file. I have a few objects here that I may or may not use in a permission set, depending on how far we get. And that's about it. Otherwise, this is just a normal SFDX project. So what we're going to do, we're going to build our first React app. We're going to do some really simple coding. We're just going to try and get it to retrieve some data. We're going to see what the local dev flow looks like. And then we're going to deploy it to Salesforce and look at it together. And then from there, we might do some vibe coding. Okay. Depends on how much time we have. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to generate the template for Salesforce Multi-Framework. And crucially, Salesforce Multi-Framework is metadata. It's metadata with a React app inside of it. So there are 3 ways you can do this. The first way is you can do SFDX create project with the Salesforce CLI and then pick one of these 2 things here, right? And these will give you some pretty comprehensive templates for building an internal app or an external app. If you're building an external app, it'll have like starter code for handling auth, which is really nice. Not going to do this. Another way to do it is from the Agentforce Vibes welcome page. So if you type in welcome in the command palette, you can open this up here. And I'll just close this. And you can create a React app using this tile. And you'll have the same option of an internal app or an external app. You'll also have the ability to bootstrap a sample app. There's a sample property management app and a sample property rental app. And these are like full scale apps to show you what you could potentially build with Salesforce Multi-Framework. The third way is using SF template. So you can use SF template, and I prefer SF template personally because it gives you kind of just enough. So the way this works is you're just going to SF template generate UI bundle, give it a name, give it an optional label, my app. If you don't give it a label, it'll just use the name essentially. And then you point it to a place. So in my case, I'm going to point it to main default UI bundles. And UI bundles is the name of the metadata that you use to deploy and update multi-framework apps. And then finally, you pass in the template. There's 2 templates, default and React Basic. I'm going to just use React Basic. So when you run this, it just creates a bunch of files for you. So we have a bunch of files here. And if we check our Explorer, check the Explorer here, close this, you can see we now have a UI bundles folder with, and this is our metadata. So it has a metadata file like any other. This is our metadata for our React app, but it also includes all of the config you'd expect for a traditional web application, right? So you have TypeScript config, you have a Vite config and related files. You have a UI bundle config. This is just created for you. In my experience, you don't really have to touch this ever. You have a GraphQL YAML file. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then inside of source, you have your React project, and it comes with API, with a client for retrieving GraphQL. It has some components that you can use. Let's see here, pages. These are essentially your pages, your route configuration, just like everything you would need for a React app. So let's run this really quickly. So to run this, once you have your template, to run it, all you need to do is just hop into the newly created metadata. So you go into UI bundles, and then you go to the app. So my app is my app, right? And from here, you just develop it the way you would any other web app. So first thing we need to do is install our dependencies, right? And while we do that, I'm going to just show you what dependencies we have. So when you load this project up, it's going to have a lot of different packages. The Salesforce packages, that data SDK here, a core UI bundle package, you need that, as well as some open source packages. So you have all of the React stuff you need. You have Shad CDN, that's a really popular UI library. You have Tailwind, and then you have some dev dependencies for working with GraphQL, testing, ESLint, stuff like that. Okay. Let's take a look, see what we got here. All right. So we downloaded all of our packages. Everything works, which is great. Okay. The next thing you would want to do is once you've downloaded your packages, you probably want to run your server. So there's two ways to do it. So you can do npm run dev. This is traditionally how you do it with development, right? And this works fine. So it's going to start a local server, and this is just like our app, and we can just click on this. And this is our app. So our React app running locally, and we can develop against it. And as we do that, it'll change thanks to React's hot reloading. So I'm going to actually do that now. And then I'm going to take a look to see if we have any questions. So what we're looking at here is the home page. So if you hop into pages, you'll have all of your pages here. And this is the home page here. So I'm going to split this to, let's see here. Can I split this to the left? Let's split this to the left. I'm going to close out my Explorer. So here's our code. Here's our app. And because this is just React, right, and it's running locally, we can very easily, very quickly just start making changes. So I can say hot reloading is great, and it will instantaneously change here. And so very quickly, just by creating a template, installing the dependencies, and then running the dev server, you can have your app running locally in just a few minutes. So let me take a quick look at the questions here because I threw a lot at you. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh my goodness, we have so many. Okay, so let's start. So from Jorge, when will multi-framework leave beta status and become GA? It is going to be GA pretty soon. I can't make any promises. I'm not on the product team, but we're talking weeks, maybe months, but pretty soon. So expect to see multi-framework go GA sometime this summer. Question from Sally here. What do we need to set up or install to start implementing React? Any plugins or tools we have to set up? That is an excellent question. Okay, so in order to start with React, now to do everything that you just saw here, to get a template, to start the template, you need all the same stuff you need to do Salesforce development, right? You need Node, you need Visual Studio Code, you need the Salesforce extension. But in addition to that, there are some very helpful extensions that you can use inside of Visual Studio Code to make your experience a lot better. All right. So I do believe, do I have React? I might have React. I might not have React. Let's see. So the one that matters the most in my experience is actually going to be this one, the GraphQL extensions. So the first one is the GraphQL syntax highlighting. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Is GraphQL syntax highlighting, because when you work on Salesforce Multi-Framework, and we're going to get there in a moment, you're primarily going to be interacting with records, retrieving them, creating them, updating them using GraphQL, which is also an option in Lightning. Okay. The second one that I highly recommend is the GraphQL language feature support extension. And what this allows you to do is take advantage of the fact that GraphQL is, and we're going to see this, a type safe way to retrieve and interact with data. And what this does is it adds auto completion validation when you're writing your GraphQL queries. So I would say grab these two from the GraphQL foundation because you probably don't have these already. So those are two tools that I would recommend that you implement. Otherwise, you just need Visual Studio Code, Salesforce CLI, and Node. Alrighty. Speaking of GraphQL, let's write some GraphQL and then I'll hop back into the questions, okay? So, let me close this out here. All right, so we have a home page and it's running locally. That's great. But if you're building a Salesforce multi-framework app, the reason you want to build it is so that you can interact with Salesforce data. So let's do some of that. Okay. Now, to spare you all from watching me type very slowly, I have some snippets that are going to help me with the demo. Okay. So the first thing that you're going to want to do to retrieve data from Salesforce is first, you're going to want to make sure that you load in the data SDK. Now, this is automatically included in every single template. And there's two things that you're primarily going to import whenever you're interacting with data on Salesforce, right? The Create Data SDK and GQL. Now, crucially, these are framework agnostic tools. These are not like React hooks or anything like that. It's just a package and it works with React. And when we support other frameworks like Vue, it'll work with Vue. Okay. So we have our template, we have our packages. The next thing we'll need to do is to retrieve our data. Okay. And again, you're going to use GraphQL. So what you want to do is there's a few parts to using GraphQL. Now, the first thing you'll need to do is to write the actual query. Now, in order to make the query something where you can get autocomplete, you'll want to use GQL. If you add GQL in front of your GraphQL query string here, it becomes like an object that you can have autocomplete for, where you have syntax highlighting and things like that. Okay. Now, if you're new to GraphQL, at a high level, it's just a new way to retrieve and mutate data. So if you want to grab information, and here we have a query that just retrieves a single contact, you essentially are going to use the UI API to query the object, right? And then within the object, it's going to have what are called edges and nodes. And these edges are just a list of the records that you're retrieving with their fields. So you can think of a node as like a record, and then the fields that the node has are your fields. So contact has an ID, it has a name, it has a title, it has an email, it has a phone. And so you can add all that information here, okay? Now, one of the benefits of GraphQL is actually being able to get type completion, but when I try it here, it doesn't work. Okay. Let me show you what you need to do. Now, I think this is going to be fixed pretty soon, but on the off chance that you decide to write some GraphQL for Salesforce Multi-Framework, I want to show you what you need to change. So here, when you generate your template, you're going to get a file called GraphQL rc.yaml. This is a file that just tells your editor where your GraphQL schema is and what documents you want to have type completion for, essentially. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go do this real quick. I'm going to cut this because it's currently in source. Cut it, put it here. I'm going to put it here. Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make a small change to it. Let's see here. Do believe what I need is to change this to this. Alrighty. So I'm going to change this a little bit. So I have my GraphQL RC here, and then I have my schema. Now the schema file, I won't go too much into this, but the schema file just essentially is a big file that tells you the types, the GraphQL types and schemas for all of the different objects that you have. You don't really have to worry about this too much. You can generally just leave this alone. You won't interact with it. It's like a generated file. Now, when you first run npm run dev, this file will be automatically generated for you. Okay, so you don't really have to think about it too much, but it's good to know that it's there. And if you want to ever generate it yourself, there's a script here for it called GraphQL schema. So you can just open your editor, right? And you can run npm run GraphQL schema, but don't worry about it too much. All right, let's finish the side quest here. So see if I can get my GraphQL thing to work. So it's still not working. Let me take a quick look. So my GraphQL config didn't work. I'm going to type in GraphQL. I'm going to try and manually restart my GraphQL LSP extension, see if it works. It might not. If it doesn't, that's fine. Doesn't look like it's picking up. You should see the GraphQL thing down there. Let me try and reload real quick. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Let's see. All right. Let's see. What's GraphQL doing? All right. It looks like it was initialized. Okay, cool. So just to let you know, you can always click the GraphQL icon. And if it says GraphQL language server cache initialized, you should have type completion. And now we do. So we can add new fields like email and stuff like that. Very useful. Okay. The other thing you'll need is when you're doing TypeScript, and you'll generally develop in TypeScript, you'll need an interface, right? And this just tells GraphQL that if you run this query, this is what it's going to return. This is the shape of what's being returned. And then you also just need an interface for rendering things inside of TypeScript. All right, so let's put it all together. We have our query. The next thing we need to do is to actually write some code to execute the query using the data SDK. So let's do that. So here in our component, and this is just a React component if you're new to React. In our component, we're going to write our code. And here is our use state. You can think of this like track, basically, right? This is the equivalent of track inside of React. And then you have use effect. And you can think of this as like kind of like your lifecycle type of hook, like connected callback, right? This runs, use effect runs when the component mounts. So what we're saying here is we're defining a function, an asynchronous function that's going to create an SDK using create data SDK. That's from the Salesforce SDK. We're going to run a query. We're going to execute our query, right? We're going to, in that query, so we're executing our query here, and it's going to return our single contact query result interface that we defined, right? And essentially, we're going to grab all of our records. We're going to map it out, and then we're going to set our state, right? It's a little bit different from, I would say, LWC. Maybe not as straightforward, but this is essentially just saying like we're setting our tracked variable to the records that we retrieved, right? Okay, cool. Now that we have our data, the last thing that we'll have to do is to just render it. So we're going to, in our template, and this is like our HTML file, basically. With React, it all goes in one file, right? In our HTML, we're just going to very quickly add our contacts and list them out, right? And we're going to have a contact ID as our key. You always need that inside of React for handling re-renders efficiently. And then we're just going to have a contact's name and then their title. Okay. And when we save it, it shows up immediately. And crucially, this is real Salesforce data. Like this is actual data that's coming from our Salesforce org. If we were to open it up, we would see it, which is pretty neat. And let's see here, could use some margin there. So let's do margin 2. Okay, that looks good. All right, I'm gonna take a look at some questions here to see what folks are wondering about. All right, so, oh my goodness, we have so many questions. Okay. This one, let's see. From Ragul, can we package and release an app exchange? Not yet, but that is on the roadmap. Excellent question. Let's see here. From Sally. If an LWC developer learns React, is there a preference moving forward which technology to use? No, that's a really great question. So the idea here is if you have significant investments inside of in React, right? If you've decided to, if you have a lot of, you have a design language, you have a design library, you want to take those assets you already have and then use them to build your Salesforce employee sites, employee apps, or experience customer portals, you can do that, right? But there's no preference of you should use React over LWC or LWC is going away. There will definitely be cases where people will prefer LWC because they're more productive in LWC. And there will be cases where people are more productive in React. And so they decide to use React, or you want to retool your web developers to be productive in Salesforce and they happen to know React. So they may use React, but I expect a lot of people will probably use LWC for employee facing apps and widgets very often. If they've been doing Salesforce development, and that people will probably find themselves using React a lot more for customer portals and externally facing sites that need really rich experiences. All right. From Jose, does the React integration work well with Apex, or do they work separately? It does work well with Apex. At the moment, the way that you interact with Apex from Salesforce Multi-Framework is through, and let me see, I can just put this here. It looks like something like this, Apex result, where you would essentially use the SDK and use this fetch, right? And you would fetch from an Apex REST service, essentially. So at the moment, to use Apex, you have to expose it using one of the Apex REST annotations, and then you just kind of query it. But what's nice is that you don't have to worry about any of the auth or anything like that. You just have to worry about the route and passing the right object, the right object in the body, the request body. So that's nice. Great questions. Let's see here. Another question from a LinkedIn user. Do we need Node.js set up? Yes, you do. Um, do you need to define the libraries in the package.json app to develop the fully fledged React app? No, you do not. You don't have to do that. Great question. Let's see here. We can find some more questions here. Is multi-framework going to support React Native as well? Not to my knowledge, but that is a really great thought. And a really great question from Ray. So this question here, crucial. How is security handled here when a React app is built? Does it honor the security we built in Salesforce? Yes, it does. It does honor the security we built in Salesforce. So these records here are being pulled based on my user that I'm logged in as through the Salesforce CLI. The SDK uses that to retrieve all these records. Now, when I deploy this app to Salesforce, it'll be the exact same story. And that's probably what we should do. Let's deploy this app to Salesforce so I can show you kind of how that whole thing works, right? So right now it's in dev mode. It's running locally on localhost 5173. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into the project and I'm going to run npm build, run build. And this is going to use Vite to build my app. All right. And it looks like I have an error here in the code. I believe this comes from the template. All right, so let's change that. So I'm gonna just go on a quick side quest here and change something. This should be an object. All right. All right, let's try it again. If you run into this, the template used positional arguments, but it's supposed to be a body. So just like wrap it in curly braces and it'll work. All right, so we're going to run npm run build. Now, what npm run build is going to do is it's going to generate a dist folder with some files in it. And this is our bundled app. We're going to send this bundled app to Salesforce along with our metadata. And you can tell this worked because you'll have a dist folder here. This contains the JavaScript and assets that we're going to send to Salesforce. And Salesforce is going to host these assets as our app inside of Salesforce. Okay. So we have our dist folder. We built our app. All right. And the next thing we're going to need to do is just deploy the metadata. And this works the exact same way that deploying any metadata works, right? You just click on the metadata and you click deploy the source to org. Now, I think I might have deployed this source to I think I might already have an app on this org. So I might have to recreate my Scratch org. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to override the conflicts here. Yep. And I'm going to close this for now because we're done with local development. Okay. So we're deploying our UI bundle. And while that's happening, I am going to take a look at the questions. Great question here. How can these components be used along LWC in pages and applications? So if you can deploy it all as one big application already. In terms of deploying it in terms of deploying it inside of an LWC, that would be micro-frameworks. But let me show you how it looks when you deploy it inside of Salesforce. So I just ran SF deploy on this UI bundle here. It's pretty sure it succeeded. I think I might have turned off my notifications. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my app here. Let's see. I wonder if I can keep it all here. Let's see. That probably won't work because the browser's not open. Okay, so I'll hop over here. And I am going to put, there we go. Okay, so when you deploy a React app, right, a UI bundle as a employee facing app, right, it shows up as an app inside of the app launcher. So my app was called My App, and the label was quite literally just My App. So if I type in My App, I have my app here, and it'll open up as essentially an app. And as you can see, because I'm in a scratch org, it lets me know that I'm logged in as my scratch org user, and you can see the app here, and we are inside of Salesforce. And so it's respecting my permissions and my record access based on my user. You don't have to really do anything for that. You just write the app, and the data SDK just does it all for you, which is really nice. Okay. Question from Diogo, I think Diago. I hope I got that right. Given the differences of LWC and React, to my understanding, does that mean that React will be used lots more when building, for instance, external sites where we would be using VFPs before, or did I understand that correctly? No, you have the right of it. I fully expect that people will be using React to build external sites a lot. I'm not saying that's the primary use case. There are certainly lots of people who are already working on internal apps with React, but very good chance that a lot of customer portals will be built with React as opposed to LWC. But it always depends on what you are most productive with and what you are most comfortable with and what your team knows. Let's see here. See here, we have so many questions. Can we use React app with Community Portal? I'm not a huge expert on Community Portal, but if a Community Portal is experience, I believe so. But I'd have to follow up with you on that one. And question here from Vijay. Does GQL support agents, or is there a future roadmap? It's a good question. I mean, GraphQL is all about records and data. So to the extent that it depends on what you're asking. If you're asking, can coding agents help you write GraphQL? Absolutely. I'd need you to follow up with me on that one, or send a follow-up question. Let's see here. All right, we got another question here. In the case where the application exists only in Salesforce and was developed directly by a developer, how can we retrieve it if the code has not yet been pushed to Git? That's a really great question. That's a really great question, because when you deploy a React app to Salesforce, what is deployed is primarily the metadata file, and the dist folder, but like the actual app code is not there. In general, you would want to make sure, especially since it's a React app and a traditional web app, you would absolutely want to put all of this in source. But that's a great question. So, question from Saras: is there any trail or reset source on Trailhead to explore this concept, React plus Salesforce completely? There, to my knowledge, there are no existing Trailhead apps. Trailhead modules that really go in depth on Salesforce Multi-Framework yet. I expect that to change in the future. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about, let's see here, multi-framework, you can go to Multi-Framework Recipes. This is a repository that my team maintains that walks you through different ways to use Salesforce Multi-Framework in terms of just like modifying data, accessing Salesforce APIs, routing, error handling, retrieving data, stuff like that. You can check this out as a educational resource, but at the moment, there isn't a Trailhead module. Okay, let's see here. Let me take a look. All right, so that is today's demo. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment here. Just a moment here. There we go. And I will take some more questions as we close out. Let's see here. So there are so many questions. Okay, so how is MFE different from this app? That's a really great question. So MFE, ultimately, MFE is about building widgets that allow you to essentially like small widgets that you can embed inside of a Lightning. Whereas what you saw just a moment ago was a React app that was essentially an app. You launched it from the app launcher, right? It's a standalone thing. Whereas MFE is like a small component that's a part of it. Okay. It's a really great question. Really, really great question. So let's see here. I'm going to just drop this one here as well. GraphQL looks like a big problem solver. Earlier, we used to write SOCL in an Apex class that we exposed as a REST API in order to use in React. Now it's native. I believe we don't need REST APIs anymore. Not for interacting with GraphQL, you do not. If you want to interact with like REST APIs that are like, Apex REST, there is a fetch method on the data SDK that you can use. But if you're just trying to retrieve data, if you're just trying to retrieve records, update records, you don't need REST for that anymore. It just works. Okay. And let's see here. Another question. This one from Sally. Is using React free, or would you need a separate license, or is there extra cost? No, there's not. There's no extra cost at all. This is just a part of the platform now. It's as free as Lightning Web Components, which is really, really cool. And another question from Dinesh. How is DML supported in React, and how is security handled? It's a really great question. So, long story short, DML essentially works kind of the same way it would if you were doing it in an Apex class. The only difference really is you're doing it through GraphQL in the same way that you can use GraphQL in LWC, and you can use GraphQL in LWC. The way it works is it respects your permissions and it updates records or creates records or deletes records based on your actual access and ownership. And so the way to really think about it is this is just like an abstraction, like a layer on top of the things that you already know, right? So you don't have to learn anything new about like, how do I secure this? How do I make sure that people have the right access? Every time a user retrieves data with the data SDK, it's done in the context of their user. And so if their user is configured for the right access, things will work as expected. Okay, here. And we have a question here. Can we use multi-framework to build Agentforce UI elements? Let's say a product listing. Kind of. You will be able to use React UI elements, right? And so you will build elements using React, but the way that those things get exposed will be through what we're calling the headless experience layer. So So yeah, you will. That's not here today, but in like open beta or anything like that. But it is a future capability. And here's a really great question. Here, the GitHub repo that I shared, so multi-framework recipes on Trailhead apps. Check it out. Mentioned that React is not supported in a dev org, so we only use it in a sandbox currently. Okay, so important, and I want to mention this one. So right now, Salesforce Multi-Framework is in open beta, and it's only supported in Scratchworks and sandboxes. So you can use your DevHub org to build a Scratch org, right? And then deploy it there. That's what I actually did. I used the Scratch org for this entire demo. But right now, it is not available in dev orgs or in production orgs in general. That will change with general availability, and general availability is coming soon. But at the moment, if you're building with React, you can develop it in a Scratch org for now, and then when GA comes, you'll be able to deploy it to production. And here's a question from Jay. Can we connect Agentforce vibes with React? It's a good question. What do you mean exactly? Like, can you use Agentforce vibes to build React based experiences on Salesforce? Absolutely, you can. You absolutely can. Okay, so that is our show today. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for the really, really amazing and awesome questions. I highly recommend that you check out um, this new way to build on a Salesforce platform, beyond just being like a really awesome way to deliver new types of experiences on Salesforce using open source libraries. It's also just like a really great way to build and a good opportunity to expand your skill set as a Salesforce developer. If you've just been building with Lightning Web Components, I would challenge you to challenge yourself to learn React, so that it not only helps you, appreciate another way of building and gives you another tool in your tool set, but allows you to kind of grow as a developer and be able to branch out in different ways, if need be, or if you're ever interested, right? So definitely check it out. And as always, I want to just do another quick plug to remind you all to connect with us, um, join the dev community. Uh, Go to developer.salesforce.com for docs and blogs. Follow us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere else. And if you're particularly interested in Salesforce multi-framework or just kind of front-endy things, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I post about this stuff pretty often, and oftentimes link to fun little demos that I created. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.